The aperture of death, the observation protocol. Not because of his job. He was a video game developer and his life was profoundly ordinary. It was because of the city. Overpopulated, rainy, full of hidden corners and other people's destinies. The hostel The Navigator on Capitol Hill was his temporary base. He chose it for its ambiance, an old Victorian building with high ceilings, creaky floors, and a huge 6-bed common room. Stephen valued his belongings. So, when he discovered that the lock on his personal locker wouldn't latch, he felt not annoyance, but a stab of cold paranoia. His locker was one of 6, lined up against the wall, facing the beds. His bed, number 4, was directly opposite. Stephen tried to close the lock, but failed. He crouched down to examine the mechanism. Everything looked fine from the outside. Then he opened the door and looked inside. He took out his backpack. That was when, in the dim light of the common room, he saw it. On the back wall, made of thin plywood, was a perfectly round, tiny hole. No more than 5 millimeters in diameter. It was aimed directly at his bed. More precisely, at his pillow. Stephen touched the edge. The wood was recently fractured. The cut was clean, sharp, with no dust. It looked as if it had been drilled with a jeweler's bit. He ran his finger over the inner edge. He felt microscopic scratches running from the center outwards. It looked as if something had been inserted and removed from it. Many times. Stephen's heart pounded louder than the creak of the old floor. He was being watched. Not for a minute, not for an hour. He was under observation with professional scrutiny. He spun around to face his bed. It was empty, perfectly made. But his phone lay on the nightstand, his laptop on the bed. Stephen felt the physical pressure of the gaze. Stephen quickly closed the locker and leaned against it, pretending to search for something in his backpack. He surveyed his neighbors. There were 5 of them. Jamal, a student always wearing headphones, always at his desk, buried in code, harmless. Emma, a backpacker, always on tours. She wasn't here today. An old man with a beard, name unknown, quiet, reading old books. His bed was far from the lockers, unlikely. A girl with an owl tattoo on her neck, Lena. An artist. Often smoking outside. Strange but not spying. The 5th spot next to his locker. Empty, vacant, perfect for an observer. The hole in Stephen's locker, number 4, was looking directly out from the side wall of locker number 5. Stephen slowly approached locker number 5. It was open. Inside lay only one thing, a thick leather glove, and an empty plastic water bottle. He reached for locker number 5. If the hole was recently made, then the observer lived here recently. Stephen looked into locker number 5. There were no holes on its back wall, which faced the room. He leaned down. On the side wall, separating locker 5 and 6, the far end, there was another hole. Just as clean, aimed at bed number 6. Stephen felt the cold crawl from his lower back to the back of his neck. This was not a personal vendetta. This was a system. Someone was systematically observing the residence, and the most terrifying thing, locker 5, was his laboratory. The wall of locker number 5 was the wall of Stephen's room. He was working from it. Stephen returned to his locker number 4. He closed it and hung the cheapest padlock he could find in his backpack on it. A meaningless gesture, but necessary for his sanity. He walked back to his bed. He lay down and looked at the lockers. He focused his eyes on the small black hole in the wall of locker number 4. He knew no one was behind it right now, but he felt that the camera had been there just an hour ago. Stephen couldn't sleep. He turned on his laptop. He started working like a security analyst, which he never was. He remembered professional advice. Network check. He connected to the hostel Wi-Fi. The standard open network navigator guessed. He ran a scan for unknown devices. After 5 minutes, the results appeared. 12 phones. Logical, a hostel. 5 laptops. His, Jamal's, Lena's, 2 others. 3 smartwatches. and one device named Clean Feed. It was broadcasting to an unknown IP address outside Seattle. The stream was very weak but constant. Stephen froze. Clean Feed. That would be the perfect name for professional covert surveillance. He tried to pinpoint the physical location of the device. The signal was strange. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once, like an echo in an empty hall. He looked back at his neighbors. Jamal was sleeping. Lena was staring at the ceiling. Stephen got up and went to the bathroom. He turned on the water. The sound of the water was necessary to mask the noise. He returned to the room and carefully approached locker number 5, the adjacent one. He found that very leather glove inside. He put it on. He reached out his hand and threaded his finger into the hole in his own locker, number 4. Stephen couldn't believe what he was doing, but he had to. He felt around the inner wall. His finger hit something smooth and cold. A lens, perfectly aligned with the hole. He felt streams of wires running from the lens into the wall of locker number 5. The camera was there. Watching him all night, Stephen pulled out his finger. He noticed a small white powder on the glove, fine like flour. He carefully collected it on a piece of paper. It was not ordinary dust. It was chemical residue. Stephen returned to his laptop. He closed access to all his accounts. Everything important was encrypted. He wondered, why observe a game developer? Did someone want to steal his latest virtual reality project? No. The observation was too personalized, aimed at the bed, at sleep. At intimate moments, Stephen remembered something else. His lock was broken. Why didn't the observer fix it? Because a broken lock is an invitation to use the locker as a laboratory. Stephen left the room and went to the lobby. He found the administrator, an old man named Henry. Henry, Stephen said. What do you know about the resident of Spot 5? Henry frowned. Spot 5? It's been vacant since last week. Why? I'm just asking, Stephen replied. Aside from me, has anyone else complained about locker issues? Henry laughed. It's an old building, son. Everyone complains about the creaking floor and the noise of the rain. Never about the lockers. Stephen understood. The observer was not an official guest. He was part of the building itself. Stephen returned to the room. He carefully moved his nightstand to locker number 4 and climbed onto it. He looked down into locker number 5 from above. The side wall of his locker had been removed. The hole was completely open. Stephen saw the microscopic camera and a long, thin wire running down into the wall. He took scissors and cut the wire. In that instant, all the lights in the common room went out. Complete absolute darkness. Stephen froze. He didn't expect that reaction. The darkness did not last long. Emergency lights came on with a red, dim glow. Stephen heard a rustle and hastily climbed down from the nightstand. What's going on? Whispered Jamal, who had jumped out of bed. Stephen didn't answer. He felt an intrusion was about to happen. He pulled the cut wire with the camera out of the locker. He put them in his pocket. Suddenly there was a loud bang on the wall adjacent to the lockers. Not on the door, but on the wall. The banging repeated. Hard, loud, as if with a sledgehammer. The wall was thin. A crack appeared on it. Police! Stephen yelled. Call the police! No one reacted. Jamal and Lena stood like statues in the red light of the emergency lamp. Stephen grabbed his backpack. He ran for the exit. The corridor was even darker. He ran into someone. It was the old man with the beard. His eyes were wide open. He was looking not at Stephen, but at the wall. He will come for all the noisy ones, the old man whispered. He wants a clean feed. Stephen pushed him away and ran down the creaking stairs. He burst onto the street. The Seattle rain lashed his face. He ran around the corner and stopped. He felt watched from all the hostel windows. He pulled the wire and camera from his pocket. He crushed the camera with his foot. It was at that moment that Stephen saw her, Emma, the traveler, who was supposedly on a tour. She stood under a store awning just 10 meters from him. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were vacant. In her hand was a smartphone. Its screen was on. It showed a live stream of the common room of The Navigator. Stephen was on the screen. His escape was their content. Stephen ran in the opposite direction. He turned into a narrow, dark alley. "It's not just a hostel," he muttered. "It's a system." He pulled out his laptop and connected the severed wire with the camera to it. He had to check the software. The camera was unusual. Its memory chip contained only one file: aberration log. Stephen opened the file. It was a text document with observation records. Subject 4, Stephen. 00:20 a.m. Unpacking suspicion. 03:15 a.m. Direct gaze at sensor. 03:20 a.m. Lock on door. Subject 3, old man. 04:10 a.m. Normal sleep cycle. 04:05 a.m. Heart rate spike. A-level clean. Subject 5, empty spot. 11:00 p.m. Sensor insertion. 11:05 p.m. Stabilized feed. Clean feed ready. Clean feed, Stephen whispered. Clean feed. Stephen remembered the white powder he found on the glove. He quickly searched the net for chemical formulas. It was a micro-dispersed anesthetic designed for shallow sleep. It was introduced through the ventilation. They didn't want them dead. They wanted them calm, their perfect unconscious sleep. The aberration log was a list of people who resisted the anesthetic or showed suspicion, like him. Stephen realized he was the aberration. His escape was their most valuable content. Stephen knew he had to return, not to save his neighbors, they were calm, but to destroy the clean feed. He returned to the hostel building. It was dark, submerged in the dim red light. He entered through the back exit into the basement. It smelled of dampness and mold. Stephen used the camera and wire as a guide. The wire must lead to the power source and data transmission. He passed through a series of dark abandoned laundries and storerooms. Finally, he reached a small locked door with a sign "Staff Only." Just beyond it, he felt a faint vibration. He picked the lock using a screwdriver and a credit card. Inside was a room, a small, hermetically sealed server node. The walls were soundproofed. Dozens of servers hummed in a steady, monotonous tone. A desk stood in the middle of the room. A laptop rested on it, connected to all the servers. On the laptop screen were 6 windows of live streams from the common room. 6 angles of observation. Stephen saw himself on one of the cameras, having just broken into the room. The camera was installed in the corner, above the door. Next to the laptop was a map of the building. 6 beds were marked in red. Next to it was a map of Seattle with dozens of such clean spots. Stephen began to work feverishly. His goal, to destroy the data. Stephen launched a script to destroy the database. The process required 5 minutes. Suddenly the door behind him closed with a dull click. He turned around. Standing in the doorway was Henry, the old administrator. His eyes were cold and calculating. "I knew you'd return, Stephen," Henry said. "You are a rare phenomenon, an aberration. You shouldn't have been able to smell the anesthetic." "What is this?" Stephen asked, nervously watching the script's progress on the laptop screen. "It's the art of observation," Henry calmly explained. "People pay millions for real life, not for the mess they see on social media. They need clean, unadulterated content, people in absolute peace. You're drugging them." "We give them peace," Henry corrected. "The peace they couldn't find in their lives. Perfect sleep for us and for them." Henry walked to the desk. He picked up a thick leather glove, the same one that was in Locker 5. "You violated the observation protocol," Henry said. "It's unforgivable." Stephen looked at the screen, 95% complete. Henry moved quickly. He swung the glove. Stephen dodged and slammed his hand onto the laptop to speed up the script's completion. 100%. A message appeared on the screen. "Database destroyed." Simultaneously, all the servers in the room fell silent. The room plunged into a dead silence. Henry froze. His face was contorted with hatred. "You lost millions of data!" he hissed. "You lost control," Stephen replied. He picked up the laptop and smashed it against the floor. Henry lunged at him. In his hand was a knife, as clean and sharp as the hole in the locker. Stephen dodged. He felt the cold blade near his side. He ran behind one of the server racks and grabbed a heavy cable. "I don't want to kill you, Stephen," Henry yelled. "You are the only witness of the aberration. You are the new content." "I don't need that," Stephen replied. He struck Henry on the head with the cable. The old man fell and went silent. Stephen looked at the dead servers. The network was destroyed. Stephen went upstairs. The red emergency light was still on. He entered the common room. His neighbors were sleeping, deeply, peacefully. Jamal, Lena, the old man. Emma was in her bed. Her phone lay next to her. Switched off, Stephen approached his locker number 4. He tore off the cheap lock. He took out his belongings. He looked at the hole in the wall. It was empty. He took a small piece of clay from his backpack and carefully sealed the hole. Forever. Stephen left the hostel. He walked through nighttime Seattle. The rain intensified. He walked towards the police station. He would tell them everything. About Henry, about the servers, about the sleep, and about the holes. He entered the station. He approached an officer and started to speak. The officer listened to him without interrupting. Then he looked at Stephen with regret. "Mr. Stephen, where is this hostel, the Navigator?" Stephen gave the address. The officer checked the database. Then he looked at Stephen with pity. "Mr. Stephen, that building was torn down 2 years ago. It's a parking lot there now." Stephen was stunned. Torn down? But he had just been there. He returned to Capitol Hill. In place of the old building was a smooth, paved parking lot. Empty. He fell to his knees. The rain washed away his tears. He found nothing. No building, no servers, no dead Henry. Nothing. He was the last aberration. Stephen felt a sudden dizziness. He remembered the white powder, the anesthetic. He felt its effect. He realized that the Navigator was not a building. It was a virtual reality, a complex game created by Henry to observe the state of paranoia. He himself was the clean feed. His struggle, his fear, his discovery were the most valuable content. Stephen smiled. Peace had finally come. He was ready to sleep, for the perfect sleep. He felt a light touch on his hand. It was Emma. She was smiling. Her eyes were vacant. "Hello, Stephen," she said in her calm, monotone voice. "Your broadcast was amazing. Now you are free from the game." She handed him a thick leather glove. "The next hostel is called The Observer. You need to insert the sensor into locker number 3. Stephen took the glove. His eyes were as calm as hers. He had taken on Henry's role. The protocol was complete. The observation continues.